Hello, my friend. It is so good to have you here with me today. Before we begin, let's just slow down for a moment. Close your eyes, if you like, and picture something very simple. 2 pieces of bread, a round piece of meat in the middle. That's all. No sauce yet, no cheese yet. Just bread and meat, sitting quietly on a plate. Now ask yourself a question. Where did this simple thing come from? Most of us eat it without ever thinking about it. We order it in a restaurant. We grab it from a drive-through window. We cook it on a hot grill in the summer. But behind this simple food is a story that stretches back thousands of years, across ancient empires, through wild grasslands, over a stormy ocean, and into small American towns where nobody could agree on who invented it first. Today, I want to take you on a journey through the history of the hamburger. Yes, the hamburger, that humble sandwich we all know so well. But I promise you, my friend, this is not a simple story. It is a story full of warriors and immigrants, inventors and rivals, fairs and wars, and one small idea that grew into a food eaten by billions of people every single year. So relax, listen closely, and let this story carry you. This is Woven English, and our story begins in a place you might not expect. It begins not in America, but in ancient Rome. Picture the scene. It is the 1st century after Christ. The Roman Empire is powerful, and its kitchens are busy. In the great houses of Rome, cooks are preparing a dish called isicia omentata. They take fine minced meat and they mix it with pine nuts, pepper, and wine. Then they shape it into a small, round patty and they cook it carefully over the fire. Does that sound familiar? A patty of seasoned minced meat. It is not exactly a hamburger, not yet, but it is an early cousin hiding quietly in a Roman cookbook nearly 2,000 years old. This recipe comes from a book called Apicius, one of the oldest cookbooks in the world, and the fact that it survived for nearly 2,000 years tells us something wonderful. Even in the ancient world, people already understood a simple truth. Meat tastes better when it is minced, seasoned, and shaped with care. It is a small discovery, but it is the very first thread in a very long story. For a long time, this idea of minced, seasoned meat traveled quietly through history, passed from one kitchen to another, one country to another, and centuries later it would find a new and surprising home far from Rome on the wide grasslands of Central Asia. Now imagine this. It is the 13th century. Across the vast plains of Mongolia and Russia, warriors on horseback are riding for days without stopping. These are the warriors of the Mongol and Tatar armies, and they need food that is fast, simple, and easy to carry. According to legend, these riders placed pieces of tough meat under their saddles before a long ride. As the horse moved hour after hour, the meat was pressed and tenderized beneath the rider's weight. By the end of the journey, the meat was soft enough to eat, and the warriors ate it raw, right there on horseback, without ever needing to stop and build a fire. It sounds almost unbelievable, doesn't it? A meal made by a saddle and a horse's gallop. But this story of minced, tenderized meat is often seen as one of the oldest roots of what would one day become the hamburger. Think about how different this is from a Roman kitchen, with its careful cooks and its warm fire. Here, on the open plains, there was no kitchen at all. There was only a horse, a rider, and a piece of meat, prepared by motion instead of fire. And yet, both stories share the same simple idea at their heart: meat made soft and easy to eat, so that a person could keep moving, keep working, keep living their busy life. As trade routes connected east and west, this idea of finely minced meat traveled into Russia, where it became a dish very close to what we now call steak tartare, raw meat, chopped fine and seasoned simply. And from Russia, the idea crossed the sea to a busy German trading city with a very important name for our story: Hamburg. By the 1200s, Hamburg had grown into one of the most important trading ports in all of Germany. Ships arrived constantly, carrying goods, spices, and, it seems, recipes as well. The Russian style of minced meat found its way into Hamburg's kitchens, where German cooks made it their own. They took the minced beef, salted it, sometimes lightly smoked it, and mixed it with onions and breadcrumbs. This became known as Hamburg steak, a hearty, filling dish, perfect for hungry sailors and travelers. Because it was salted, it also lasted a very long time, which made it ideal for something else too: a long sea voyage. And in the 1800s, thousands of German families boarded ships and sailed across the Atlantic Ocean, looking for a new life in America. And of course, they carried their recipes with them, including Hamburg steak. When these German immigrants arrived in cities like New York, restaurants and food stalls began serving this dish on their menus, listed proudly as Hamburg steak. Americans tried it, and they loved it. But at this point in our story, it was still served on a plate with a fork, not yet inside a bun. So here is where our story takes an important turn. Somewhere, at some point, someone had a simple idea. What if we put this meat between two pieces of bread? Let's pause here for a moment and gather our thoughts, because our journey so far has traveled a very long distance. We began with a Roman patty of minced meat and spices. We traveled across the grasslands of Mongolia, where warriors softened meat beneath their saddles. We arrived in the trading port of Hamburg, where German cooks turned it into a salted steak. And finally, we crossed the ocean to America, where immigrants brought the dish with them. Bread and meat had existed side by side for centuries, but they had never truly become one single food. That moment was still waiting to happen. And here, my friend, the story becomes very interesting. Because in America, at the end of the 1800s, several different people, in several different places, all claimed that they were the one who first put that meat inside a bun. Let's meet them. In 1885, in the small town of Seymour, Wisconsin, a 15-year-old boy named Charlie Nagreen was selling meatballs from an ox-drawn food stand at the county fair. But there was a problem. People walking around the fair found it very difficult to eat meatballs while strolling from one attraction to another. Sales were slow, so young Charlie had an idea. He flattened his meatballs into patties, placed them between two slices of bread, and called his new creation a hamburger. From that day on, people called him Hamburger Charlie, and he returned to that same fair every single year, selling his sandwiches and playing his guitar until his death in 1951. That very same year, 1885, in a different American state entirely, two brothers named Charles and Frank Menches were selling sausage sandwiches at a fair in Hamburg, New York. One very hot day, they ran out of pork. The local butchers refused to slaughter more pigs in such heat. With no sausage left to sell, the brothers made a quick decision. They used ground beef instead, mixed it with coffee and brown sugar for flavor, and served it as a sandwich. When a customer asked what to call it, Frank looked around and saw a banner with the town's name, and so they called it a Hamburger after Hamburg, New York. Then, in 1891, far away in Oklahoma, a young man named Oscar Weber Bilby built his own iron grill. On the 4th of July, he lit a hickory wood fire beneath it, cooked ground Angus beef into patties, and placed them onto his wife's homemade yeast buns. His family always insisted that this, right here, was the true first hamburger, complete with a proper bun. And in 1900, in New Haven, Connecticut, a Danish immigrant named Louis Lassen was running a small lunch cart. One busy day, a customer asked for something quick to eat. Lassen placed a broiled beef patty between two slices of toast and served it immediately. Years later, in the year 2000, the Library of Congress officially declared that Louis's lunch was the birthplace of the hamburger sandwich in the United States. So who is right? Charlie Nagreen in Wisconsin? The Menches brothers in New York? Oscar Bilby in Oklahoma? Or Louis Lassen in Connecticut? The truth, my friend, is that we may never know for certain. Perhaps several people in several places all had the same simple idea at almost the same time without ever knowing about each other. And maybe that tells us something important. Great ideas do not always belong to one single genius in one single moment. Sometimes they belong to ordinary people solving ordinary problems at almost the same time in completely different corners of the world. Whoever truly invented it, by the early 1900s, the hamburger had a new stage on which to shine, and it was a very big stage indeed. In 1904, the Great World's Fair opened in St. Louis, Missouri. Thousands of visitors came from all across America and beyond to see new inventions, new machines, and new foods. And among the food stands at that fair, the hamburger sandwich was served to enormous crowds, many of whom were tasting it for the very first time. After the fair, word spread quickly. This new sandwich was cheap, filling, and delicious. Soon, small diners and food carts across America began serving hamburgers of their own. But there was still a problem. In many places, ground beef had a poor reputation. People worried about cleanliness. They worried about what exactly was inside their sandwich. If the hamburger was going to become a truly beloved food, it needed something more. It needed trust. And that trust arrived in 1921 in Wichita, Kansas, when two men, Walter Anderson and Edgar Waldo Ingram, opened the very first White Castle restaurant. White Castle did something clever. They built their restaurants with shining white walls to suggest cleanliness and purity. They let customers watch their food being cooked right in front of them, so there was nothing to hide. and they sold their small, square hamburgers for just 5 cents each. White Castle became the first true hamburger chain in America, and it changed everything. The hamburger was no longer a suspicious street food. It became a trusted, respectable, everyday meal, one that any family could afford. Think about how important this moment truly was. For centuries, this simple food had been searching for its place. In ancient Rome, it belonged only to those with fine kitchens and skilled cooks. In Mongolia, it belonged only to warriors on horseback. In Hamburg, it belonged mostly to sailors and travelers. But now, in a small white restaurant in Kansas, it finally belonged to absolutely everyone for just 5 cents a sandwich. And once trust was built, the hamburger was ready for its biggest transformation of all. In the year 1940, 2 brothers, Richard and Maurice McDonald, opened a small restaurant in San Bernardino, California. At first, it was a typical drive-in, but in 1948, the brothers made a bold decision. They closed the restaurant and reopened it with a completely new system. They called it the Speedy Service System. Their kitchen worked like a small factory. Every burger was made the exact same way, every single time, incredibly quickly and incredibly cheaply. A few years later, a traveling salesman named Ray Kroc visited their restaurant, and he could hardly believe what he saw. Long lines of customers served in seconds, again and again, all day long. Kroc convinced the McDonald brothers to let him sell franchises of their restaurant across the entire country. And from that single restaurant in California, an empire grew. By the 1960s, golden arches were rising over highways and city streets across the entire United States. Within a few more decades, those same golden arches appeared in Japan, in France, in Russia, and eventually in more than 100 countries around the world. Today, McDonald's serves customers in nearly every country on Earth. The Big Mac alone has become one of the most recognized foods in the entire world, so famous that economists even use its price to compare the cost of living between different countries. Think about that for a moment. A sandwich, invented by ordinary people, solving an ordinary problem, had grown into a symbol that economists use to understand the entire global economy. That is quite a journey for 2 pieces of bread and a piece of meat. And the story didn't stop there. Once the hamburger had conquered America, it began to conquer the rest of the world too, and every culture that welcomed it added its own personal touch. In Japan, you can find hamburgers topped with teriyaki sauce and a fried egg. In India, where many people do not eat beef, you can find hamburgers made from chicken, lamb, or vegetables instead. In Australia, it is common to find a hamburger topped with a slice of beetroot and a fried egg. And across Europe, gourmet restaurants now serve hamburgers made from the finest cuts of beef, sometimes costing far more than the 5-cent burgers of White Castle ever did. One simple idea, patty and bread together, had traveled across every ocean and adapted itself to every culture it touched. And so, my friend, we arrive at the end of our journey together. We began in ancient Rome with a small patty of seasoned meat. We traveled across the grasslands of Mongolia, where warriors softened meat beneath their saddles. We sailed to Hamburg, Germany, where cooks turned it into a salted steak. We crossed the Atlantic Ocean to America, where several different people, in several different towns, each believed they were the one who placed that meat inside a bun for the very first time. We stood in the crowds at the 1904 World's Fair. We watched White Castle build trust with shining white walls, and we watched two brothers in California turn a simple sandwich into a global empire. The history of the hamburger is not really about meat and bread at all. It is about how a small idea can travel an enormous distance, changing just a little with every new hand that touches it, until finally it belongs to everyone, everywhere. And you know, my friend, that reminds me of something else. Something much closer to you. Think about your own journey with English. It did not arrive all at once, fully formed, like a finished hamburger served on a plate. It came together slowly, piece by piece. A new word here, a better pronunciation there. A sentence that finally made sense after you had heard it many times before. Just like this simple sandwich, built patiently across centuries and continents, your English is also being built, patiently, one small piece at a time. And every single piece matters, even the ones that feel too small to notice. Now, I would love to hear from you. Tell me in the comments, what is your favorite way to eat a hamburger? With cheese? With a fried egg, like they do in Australia? Or perhaps completely plain, the way Louis Lassen first served it back in 1900? And while you're there, tell me where in the world you are listening from today. If you enjoyed traveling through this story with me, please give this video a like and subscribe to Woven English so you never miss our next journey together. Until next time, my friend, take care of yourself. Keep listening, keep learning, and never stop being curious.